The moment you mistake dignity for weakness is usually the moment your own story begins to unravel. Officer Ethan Walker had worn his badge for nearly 12 years, and somewhere along the way he had convinced himself that instinct mattered more than patience. On a bright Thursday afternoon in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, the sidewalks buzzed with office workers, tourists, and shoppers weaving between cafes and boutiques beneath a cloudless blue sky. Traffic rolled steadily until a sleek metallic silver Aston Martin eased into a curbside parking space with quiet confidence, its polished finish reflecting the glass towers above. Heads turned almost immediately. Expensive cars always attracted attention, but this time the curiosity deepened when the driver's door opened and an elderly black woman stepped out with calm, measured grace. Evelyn Brooks adjusted the sleeve of her navy blazer, straightened a simple pearl necklace, and locked the vehicle with an effortless press of her key fob. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime earning respect instead of demanding it. There was nothing flashy about her appearance beyond the remarkable automobile itself. Her silver curls framed a warm face marked by wisdom rather than pride, and she smiled politely at a passing family before beginning to walk toward the entrance of a nearby civic building. Ethan noticed the scene from across the street while sitting inside his patrol SUV. His eyes lingered on the luxury car, then shifted toward Evelyn, and almost instantly his assumptions filled in every blank he had never bothered to question. Within seconds he activated his lights, stepped onto the sidewalk, and called out firmly, "Ma'am, I need you to stop for a moment." Evelyn paused immediately, turned with composed curiosity, and answered with a gentle smile. "Of course, officer. How can I help you today?" Ethan approached with measured authority, glancing from the vehicle back to her. "Is this your car?" he asked. "Yes," Evelyn replied simply. "May I see your driver's license and the registration?" She handed both over without hesitation, her hands perfectly steady. Ethan examined the documents longer than necessary before looking up again. "I'm going to need to inspect the vehicle." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "May I ask the reason for that?" Her voice remained respectful, never rising above a calm conversational tone. Ethan folded his arms. Routine verification. Several pedestrians slowed their pace. A young couple stopped near the corner. Someone quietly lifted a phone, sensing an unusual moment unfolding. Evelyn looked at Ethan for a brief second before glancing toward her car, then back at him. She never argued. She never protested. Instead, she asked one quiet question that somehow made the busy street feel strangely still. "Officer," she said with remarkable composure, "are you absolutely certain?" Ethan barely reacted. To him, it sounded like hesitation. To everyone watching, it sounded like something else entirely. Without another word, he walked toward the Aston Martin, convinced he was about to prove himself right, while Evelyn remained exactly where she stood, patient, dignified, and impossibly calm, as though she already understood that tomorrow morning would look very different from today. Officer Ethan Walker circled the Aston Martin slowly, his polished boots echoing against the pavement as if every measured step reinforced his confidence. The small gathering on the sidewalk continued to grow, drawn by curiosity more than confrontation. A delivery driver paused beside his truck. Two college students whispered while pretending to check their phones. A retired couple exchanged uncertain glances. Charlotte was a busy city where unusual moments disappeared quickly, yet something about the quiet exchange between the officer and the elderly woman made people stay. Ethan carefully examined the license plate before comparing it with the registration once again. Every document appeared valid. Every number matched perfectly, and yet he continued searching for something that would justify his growing suspicion. Evelyn Brooks remained several feet away with her hands comfortably folded in front of her, neither impatient nor intimidated. She simply watched the scene unfold with an expression that revealed almost nothing. The afternoon breeze stirred the trees lining the boulevard, carrying the faint sound of traffic and distant conversations, but around them an unusual silence had settled. Ethan opened the driver's door and looked inside the immaculate cabin. Rich leather seats, a neatly organized center console, and a dashboard that reflected meticulous care greeted him. There were no loose papers, no clutter, and nothing that suggested carelessness. Everything about the vehicle reflected discipline and attention to detail. He inspected the glove compartment, the storage compartments, and every area within easy reach, convinced that persistence would eventually reward him with an explanation that fit the story already forming inside his mind. Evelyn never interrupted. She never questioned each movement or attempted to hurry the process. Instead, she observed quietly, occasionally offering a polite smile to passers-by who looked at her with sympathy. One young woman finally stepped closer and asked softly, "Ma'am, are you all right?" Evelyn answered with the same steady warmth she had shown from the beginning. "I appreciate your kindness. Everything will be all right." Those simple words carried a calm certainty that puzzled everyone who heard them. Ethan closed one compartment and opened another, growing increasingly frustrated by the complete absence of anything suspicious. He checked the vehicle identification number against the paperwork again. It matched perfectly. He examined the insurance information. Current. He reviewed the registration. Valid. Even so, he refused to accept what the evidence continued to tell him. Captain Marcus Hill happened to drive past the intersection on his way to a meeting and briefly noticed Ethan standing beside the luxury car. He slowed for only a moment before continuing through the light, assuming it was an ordinary traffic stop. Across the street, inside the upper floors of the Municipal Administration Building, several city officials gathered around a conference table discussing preparations for an important leadership announcement scheduled for the following morning. A sealed folder rested near the center of the table, untouched, while a digital clock quietly counted down the hours. Back on the sidewalk, Evelyn's cell phone vibrated gently inside her handbag. She glanced at the screen, allowed the call to continue unanswered, and placed the phone back without the slightest hint of concern. Ethan noticed the gesture but dismissed it completely. His attention remained fixed on proving a theory that refused to become reality. As another bystander quietly began recording from a respectful distance, Evelyn looked toward the skyline for just a moment before returning her eyes to the officer, carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that truth rarely needed to announce its arrival because, sooner or later, it always introduced itself. The final compartment closed with a quiet click that seemed louder than the conversations surrounding them. Officer Ethan Walker stepped back from the Aston Martin and looked once more at the flawless paperwork in his hands. Every document had checked out exactly as it should have. Every identification number matched. Every record appeared clean. Yet instead of accepting the evidence before him, he searched for another reason to justify the time he had already invested. His confidence had slowly transformed into determination, and determination into quiet stubbornness. Evelyn Brooks noticed the change immediately. She had spent decades reading people in moments when words revealed very little. She recognized the subtle tightening around Ethan's eyes, the slight hesitation before each decision, and the growing discomfort that often appeared when certainty began to slip away. Still, she offered him nothing except patience. The crowd remained respectful, though the atmosphere had changed. At first, people had expected excitement. Now they simply watched two individuals standing on opposite sides of an invisible line, one relying on authority, the other relying on composure. A father walking with his young son slowed near the edge of the sidewalk. The little boy looked at Evelyn and quietly asked, "Dad, did she do something wrong?" His father paused before answering. "Sometimes we have to wait until we know all the facts." Evelyn overheard the exchange and smiled gently at the child, who smiled back without hesitation. That simple moment lingered longer than anyone expected. Ethan finally returned the registration and driver's license. "Everything appears to be in order," he said, although the words carried little satisfaction. Evelyn accepted the documents carefully and placed them inside her handbag. She could have walked away immediately, but instead she remained standing for another moment, meeting Ethan's eyes with calm sincerity. "Officer Walker," she said after reading his name from the badge displayed on his uniform, "every decision we make becomes part of someone else's memory. I hope today becomes a good one for you." The statement caught Ethan off guard. There was no anger in her voice, no sarcasm, no accusation, only quiet reflection. Before he could respond, Evelyn thanked him politely, turned toward the civic building, and continued her walk at the same unhurried pace with which she had arrived. The bystanders gradually dispersed, though several exchanged puzzled expressions as if they sensed the story had not truly ended. One of the college students stopped recording and looked at his friend. That was strange, he whispered. She seemed calmer than the officer. His friend nodded, almost like she knew something nobody else did. Across town, inside City Hall, Mayor Daniel Foster concluded a private meeting with Deputy Chief Rebecca Collins and several municipal officials. A presentation folder remained closed beside a polished wooden conference table, marked only with the city's official seal. The mayor glanced at the wall clock before saying, "Tomorrow morning needs to begin exactly on schedule." Rebecca nodded confidently. "Everything is ready." Neither mentioned a name aloud. Neither noticed that the events unfolding only a few miles away would soon become unexpectedly relevant. As the afternoon sun dipped lower over Charlotte, Evelyn entered the civic building and greeted the receptionist, who welcomed her with unmistakable warmth. They exchanged a brief conversation before the receptionist handed Evelyn a visitor badge that remained tucked inside her handbag without being displayed. Moments later, the elevator doors closed softly behind her as she disappeared toward the upper floors. Outside, Ethan returned to his patrol vehicle, believing the encounter had simply been another routine stop added to an ordinary shift. He started the engine, pulled back into traffic, and drove away without realizing that some of the most important moments in a person's career often seem completely ordinary until the following day changes the meaning of everything that came before. The rest of Ethan Walker's shift passed without anything remarkable happening, at least from his perspective. He answered routine calls, directed traffic around a construction zone, and completed reports inside his patrol vehicle while the late afternoon sun slowly faded into a soft Carolina sunset. By the time he parked behind the precinct, the encounter with Evelyn Brooks had already begun to feel like another ordinary entry in a long career filled with similar moments. Inside the station, the familiar rhythm of evening duty continued without interruption. Officers exchanged stories over fresh coffee, dispatch radios crackled with routine updates, and paperwork accumulated on nearly every desk. Ethan leaned back in his chair as several colleagues gathered nearby. "Interesting afternoon," one officer asked with a grin after noticing the unusually long traffic stop listed in the activity log. Ethan shrugged with quiet confidence. "Luxury car. Something did not feel right at first, so I checked everything." Another officer looked up from his computer. "Did you find anything?" Ethan shook his head. "No. Everything was clean." The room fell silent for a brief moment before someone laughed lightly. "Well, at least you were thorough." Ethan accepted the comment as praise rather than reflection. He believed experience had justified every decision he made that afternoon, even if the outcome had not matched his expectations. Across the city, lights still glowed inside several offices on the upper floors of the Municipal Administration Building. Mayor Daniel Foster remained in discussion with Deputy Chief Rebecca Collins and members of the City Council. Printed agendas lay neatly, arranged around the conference table beside carefully prepared welcome materials. One folder, distinguished only by an official city seal embossed in gold, remained unopened in front of an empty chair reserved for someone who had not yet arrived. Rebecca glanced toward the folder before checking her watch. "Everything for tomorrow has been confirmed," she said. The mayor nodded. "Good. I want the transition to demonstrate professionalism from the very first minute." No further explanation followed. Meanwhile, Evelyn Brooks quietly exited the building through a private entrance shortly after sunset. She carried the same handbag, wore the same calm expression, and thanked the security officer holding the door with genuine warmth. As she walked toward the parking garage, another city employee greeted her respectfully. "Have a wonderful evening, Ms. Brooks." She smiled. "Thank you. Tomorrow will be an important day for all of us." The employee smiled back without adding another word. A few minutes later, Evelyn drove home through quiet neighborhoods lined with maple trees gently moving in the evening breeze. Classical music played softly inside the Aston Martin while the city lights reflected across the windshield. Her phone rang once again. This time she answered. "Good evening," she said warmly. A familiar voice replied. "Everything is prepared for tomorrow morning." Evelyn looked ahead at the peaceful road before answering. "Thank you. Let us make certain the focus stays where it belongs, on serving the community." The call ended after only a few moments. Back at the precinct, Captain Marcus Hill gathered the night shift before everyone left for the evening. "Reminder," he announced. "All personnel are expected in full dress uniform tomorrow morning. Attendance is mandatory." We will be welcoming our new police chief." Conversations immediately spread across the room. Officers exchanged guesses, rumors, and predictions. Some expected an experienced administrator from another state. Others believed the city would promote someone already working within the department. Ethan listened with mild curiosity before collecting his belongings. Leadership changes happened from time to time, and he assumed this one would be no different. As he stepped outside into the cool evening air, he glanced briefly toward the city skyline, glowing beneath the stars. Tomorrow promised nothing more than another scheduled ceremony before another ordinary shift. He could not possibly know that the calm woman whose memory lingered only faintly in his thoughts had already become the quiet center of an entirely different conversation unfolding behind closed doors. Morning arrived beneath a pale golden sunrise that stretched across the Charlotte skyline, casting long reflections over glass buildings and quiet streets that had not yet reached the rush of another business day. Inside police headquarters, officers moved through the lobby wearing freshly pressed dress uniforms, adjusting ties, polishing nameplates, and exchanging polite greetings as anticipation quietly filled the building. Leadership transitions always carried an unusual energy. Some welcomed change with optimism, while others preferred familiar routines. Officer Ethan Walker walked through the front entrance carrying a cup of black coffee, nodding casually to several co-workers before taking his place in the assembly room. Conversations flowed easily around him. One officer confidently predicted the department would introduce a nationally recognized administrator from Chicago. Another insisted the new leader had spent years with a federal agency. No one seemed to possess more than rumors, yet everyone spoke with remarkable certainty. Ethan listened with only passing interest. To him, promotions happened far above his level of responsibility. His concern remained completing assignments, following schedules, and continuing the career he believed he had built through sound judgment. Captain Marcus Hill entered the room carrying a folder and immediately drew everyone's attention. "Good morning, everyone," he announced. "Thank you for arriving early. Our ceremony will begin shortly. Please remember that today represents a new chapter for this department. Professionalism is expected from every member of this agency." The officers responded with respectful silence as Captain Hill continued. Reviewing the schedule. Outside the conference room, Deputy Chief Rebecca Collins personally greeted city officials arriving one by one. The mayor's executive assistant confirmed seating arrangements while communications staff quietly tested microphones and presentation screens. On a nearby table rested a single leather portfolio embossed with the official city seal, accompanied by a neatly folded welcome letter awaiting its recipient. Across town, Evelyn Brooks stood before a bedroom mirror fastening a simple silver brooch onto the same navy blazer she had worn the previous afternoon. There was nothing extravagant about her appearance. Every detail reflected quiet professionalism rather than status. She paused only long enough to look at a framed photograph resting beside the window. It showed a much younger Evelyn standing beside a group of community volunteers during the opening of a neighborhood youth center years earlier. She smiled softly before picking up her handbag and car keys. As she stepped outside, neighbors waved from nearby front porches. One elderly man called out, "Big day today, Evelyn?" She answered with her familiar warmth. Every day brings another opportunity to serve. The Aston Martin rolled smoothly through the peaceful morning traffic, passing familiar streets where shop owners unlocked doors and children waited for school buses beneath the cool morning air. Inside the vehicle, the radio quietly discussed local community events without mentioning anything about the ceremony about to take place. Evelyn drove without hurry, her expression steady and thoughtful. She appeared less concerned with the importance of the occasion than with the responsibility waiting beyond it. Back at headquarters, the assembly room gradually filled until every seat was occupied. Officers straightened their uniforms as city council members entered alongside Mayor Daniel Foster. A respectful hush settled across the room. Captain Hill glanced toward the main entrance before checking his watch one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "our guest has arrived." Every conversation stopped. Every eye shifted toward the closed doors. Ethan lifted his coffee cup one last time before setting it quietly on the table, unaware that within moments the ordinary assumptions he carried from the previous afternoon would begin to dissolve beneath a truth that had been standing calmly in front of him all along. The double doors opened without fanfare, yet the entire room seemed to pause before anyone consciously realized why. Evelyn Brooks walked inside with the same measured confidence she had displayed on the sidewalk less than 24 hours earlier. Her navy blazer was perfectly tailored, her posture unmistakably composed, and her calm smile reflected neither triumph nor resentment. Mayor Daniel Foster stepped forward immediately to greet her with a warm handshake. Deputy Chief Rebecca Collins followed with genuine respect before guiding her toward the front of the room. Every officer stood automatically as protocol required, but within seconds the formal gesture gave way to visible surprise. Ethan Walker felt the color drain from his face. His mind replayed every moment from the previous afternoon with startling clarity. The luxury car, the quiet questions, the flawless paperwork, the patient expression that had never once turned into anger. Suddenly her final words echoed louder than they had on the sidewalk. Every decision we make becomes part of someone else's memory. Ethan understood those words very differently now. Captain Marcus Hill welcomed everyone before introducing the city's newest police chief. As the announcement concluded, respectful applause filled the room. Evelyn thanked the audience with a gracious nod before approaching the podium. She looked across the assembled officers, making deliberate eye contact with people throughout the room. When her eyes briefly met Ethan's, she offered exactly the same calm expression she had worn the previous afternoon. There was no trace of accusation, no visible disappointment, and certainly no satisfaction at anyone's discomfort. She simply continued scanning the room as though every person deserved the same attention. "Good morning," she began in a warm, steady voice. "Public service is built one decision at a time. Every interaction shapes the trust our community places in this department. That trust is earned through professionalism, fairness, and respect shown equally to every person we meet." The room remained perfectly still. Her words were neither dramatic nor emotional, yet they carried unusual weight because they sounded less like prepared remarks and more like principles she had lived for years. "Our badge represents responsibility before authority," she continued. "Communities remember how they are treated long after individual conversations end. We cannot control every circumstance, but we can always control the dignity with which we treat another human being." Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. No one else in the room understood why those sentences landed so personally. To everyone around him, this sounded like an inspiring inaugural address. To him, every sentence quietly reflected the encounter he wished he could revisit. After the speech concluded, the officers applauded once again. Mayor Foster congratulated Chief Brooks before several city officials approached to welcome her personally. Conversations resumed throughout the room as people introduced themselves one by one. Ethan remained near the back, uncertain whether to leave immediately or wait for instructions. His confidence from the previous evening had quietly disappeared, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that first impressions could sometimes reveal more about the observer than the person being observed. Across the room, Chief Brooks accepted greetings with the same warmth she had shown neighbors, receptionists, and strangers alike. She thanked each person individually, listened carefully, and remembered names with remarkable ease. Nothing about her demeanor suggested someone interested in proving a point. Instead, she carried herself like a leader focused entirely on the work ahead. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of introductions, an invisible shift had already begun. The ceremony had ended, but a far more meaningful test was only beginning, one that would not depend on rank, speeches, or titles, but on whether character could rise above assumption when the opportunity for true accountability finally arrived. The ceremony gradually gave way to the ordinary rhythm of a working morning. But the atmosphere inside headquarters had changed in ways that could not be measured by schedules or assignments. Officers returned to their desks carrying fresh impressions of their new leader, repeating small observations about her calm presence and thoughtful remarks. Ethan Walker, however, could not escape the weight of a single afternoon that now seemed far more significant than it had only yesterday. Every routine task felt strangely different. Every familiar hallway reminded him of the unexpected connection between two ordinary moments that had become one unforgettable lesson. Shortly before noon, Captain Marcus Hill stopped beside Ethan's desk. Chief Brooks would like to meet with you this afternoon, he said evenly before continuing down the hallway. The words were simple, yet they echoed through Ethan's thoughts long after the captain disappeared around the corner. He quietly acknowledged the request and returned to his paperwork, although his attention remained fixed on the meeting ahead. Across the building, Chief Evelyn Brooks settled into her office with remarkable simplicity. Family photographs occupied one corner of a bookshelf. Community awards rested neatly inside a glass cabinet, not displayed for attention, but preserved as reminders of years spent serving others. Her desk held only a notebook, several policy folders, and a framed card bearing a single sentence written in elegant script. Respect is demonstrated through daily choices. Rebecca Collins entered carrying a binder containing departmental briefings and personnel summaries. Your afternoon schedule begins with division supervisors, Rebecca explained, followed by individual introductions with several officers. Evelyn nodded appreciatively. Good. I prefer learning about people through conversations before making assumptions. Rebecca smiled. That philosophy will surprise some people. Evelyn returned the smile. Sometimes being surprised is how people begin to grow. Hours later, Ethan stood outside the chief's office, straightening his uniform before the receptionist invited him inside. The office felt bright rather than intimidating. Sunlight filtered through large windows overlooking the city skyline, creating an atmosphere more welcoming than formal. Evelyn stood as he entered and offered a polite handshake. Officer Walker, thank you for coming. Ethan accepted the greeting with visible hesitation. Congratulations on your appointment, Chief Brooks. She thanked him warmly before inviting him to sit. For several moments, neither mentioned the previous afternoon. Instead, Evelyn asked about his years with the department, his experience working patrol, and what originally inspired him to become a police officer. Ethan answered honestly. He spoke about wanting to help people, protect neighborhoods, and earn the respect his father had associated with public service. Evelyn listened without interruption, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that reflected genuine interest rather than evaluation. Finally, after a comfortable silence settled between them, she folded her hands gently on the desk. Do you remember our conversation yesterday? She asked quietly. Ethan looked down before answering. Yes, Chief. I have thought about it ever since I walked into the ceremony this morning. Evelyn nodded. I imagined you might. Her voice remained calm, free from judgment. Yesterday was not important because of who I am. It was important because every resident deserves the same professionalism regardless of occupation, appearance, age, or circumstance. Titles should never determine the quality of our respect. Ethan slowly met her eyes. There was no anger waiting for him, only honesty. In that moment, he realized the greatest discomfort did not come from being recognized by his new chief. It came from recognizing the distance between the officer he believed he had become and the officer he had once hoped to be. Outside the office, the department continued through another ordinary afternoon, unaware that one quiet conversation behind a closed door had already begun shaping the future of both a career and the culture of an entire agency. When Ethan Walker stepped out of Chief Evelyn Brooks's office, the hallway looked exactly as it had only 30 minutes earlier, yet everything inside him felt different. The familiar walls, the polished floors, the conversations drifting from nearby offices all remained unchanged, but the confidence he had carried into the building that morning had quietly given way to reflection. He walked past officers discussing schedules and case assignments without joining the conversations. Instead, he replayed every word the chief had spoken. She had never accused him. She had never embarrassed him. She had simply reminded him that respect should never depend on who a person turned out to be. Those words settled more deeply than any formal reprimand ever could. Later that afternoon, Chief Brooks met with her command staff to discuss department priorities for the months ahead. Community engagement, professional development, and public trust topped the agenda. She spoke with clear purpose, but without unnecessary formality, encouraging every supervisor to share honest observations about the department's strengths and areas needing improvement. When the discussion turned toward traffic enforcement, she paused thoughtfully before addressing the room. Every lawful stop begins with responsibility, she said. The public notices not only what we do, but how we do it. Courtesy is never a weakness. Patience is never wasted. Professional judgment grows stronger when it is supported by facts rather than assumptions. Several supervisors nodded in agreement while taking notes. Captain Marcus Hill recognized that the message reached beyond policy manuals. It reflected a philosophy capable of shaping the culture of the entire agency. Before the meeting concluded, Chief Brooks requested that the department begin reviewing recent citizen interactions as part of an educational initiative focused on communication and decision-making. She emphasized that the purpose was learning, not humiliation. The goal is improvement, she explained. If we create an environment where people fear admitting mistakes, we prevent growth before it even begins. That same afternoon, Ethan received a message asking him to report to the Professional Standards Division the following morning. The notice described a routine review connected to a recent citizen contact after publicly available recordings and departmental documentation had been submitted for evaluation. Ethan understood immediately which encounter had prompted the review. His stomach tightened, not because he expected anger, but because he now viewed his own decisions through a different lens. The next morning, he entered the conference room, where representatives from Professional Standards greeted him with calm professionalism. A supervisor explained the process carefully before displaying synchronized body camera footage, dashboard camera recordings, and publicly submitted videos recorded from the sidewalk. Viewed together, the event appeared more complete than Ethan had remembered. Every question, every pause, every assumption became visible from perspectives he had never considered during the moment itself. No one raised their voice. No one rushed to conclusions. The discussion focused on departmental expectations, legal procedures, and opportunities for better judgment in future encounters. After reviewing the material, the panel determined that additional training and temporary administrative reassignment would be appropriate while the department completed its formal evaluation under established policy. Ethan accepted the decision without argument. Walking back through headquarters afterward, he noticed officers greeting community members entering the lobby with simple smiles and respectful conversation. For the first time in years, he realized those ordinary moments were not small at all. They were the foundation upon which every badge earned its meaning. High above the lobby, sunlight poured through the glass atrium, illuminating the department's mission statement engraved across the wall. Ethan stopped for only a moment to read it carefully, understanding at last that integrity was not measured by how confidently someone exercised authority, but by how consistently they honored the dignity of every person they encountered, especially when no one knew who that person might become. Several weeks passed, and the changes inside the Charlotte Police Department became visible not through dramatic announcements, but through countless ordinary interactions. Officers spent more time listening before speaking. Supervisors encouraged thoughtful discussion after difficult calls instead of rushing through reports. Community meetings that had once drawn only a handful of residents gradually filled with families, business owners, teachers, and neighborhood volunteers who wanted their voices to be heard. Chief Evelyn Brooks attended many of those gatherings herself, often arriving early and staying long after the official agenda had ended. She believed trust was built one conversation at a time, and she demonstrated that belief through consistent action rather than impressive speeches. Ethan Walker returned to patrol after completing additional training and administrative review. His assignment looked much the same as before, yet his approach had changed in ways even his closest colleagues noticed. One crisp autumn afternoon, he responded to a call involving an older driver whose luxury sedan had stalled near a busy intersection. Traffic backed up while impatient drivers sounded their horns. Ethan stepped from his patrol vehicle, greeted the driver politely, and asked if she was all right before discussing anything else. He listened carefully, helped direct traffic around the disabled car, and arranged roadside assistance without making assumptions about the situation or the person behind the wheel. A nearby shop owner watched the entire exchange before quietly saying, "That officer handled everything with real respect." Ethan heard the comment, but did not respond. He simply nodded with quiet gratitude, understanding that genuine professionalism rarely demanded recognition. Later that evening, Captain Marcus Hill stopped by his desk and placed a handwritten note beside the incident report. It contained only one sentence. "Growth is measured by the choices people make after they discover they can do better." Ethan read the message twice before carefully folding it into his notebook. Across the hall, Chief Brooks looked through community feedback submitted during the previous month. Many comments praised officers by name for patience, courtesy, and clear communication. She smiled softly, not because every challenge had disappeared, but because progress had begun to replace frustration. Rebecca Collins entered the office carrying another stack of reports and asked, "Do you think people can truly change?" Evelyn looked toward the city skyline, glowing beyond her office window before answering. People change when they choose humility over pride and understanding over assumption. The opportunity is always there. The decision belongs to each individual. Months later, during the department's annual community appreciation event, children laughed as they climbed into patrol vehicles, families shared meals with officers, and neighbors gathered beneath bright autumn trees celebrating the partnership between the department and the community it served. Ethan noticed Evelyn speaking with residents from every part of the city exactly as she had spoken to strangers on the sidewalk months earlier, with warmth, patience, and unwavering dignity. He finally walked over and thanked her, not for protecting his career, but for refusing to let one difficult moment define the person he could still become. Evelyn smiled gently before offering the same quiet wisdom that had guided every decision she made. "A badge may open a door," she said, "but character determines what happens after you walk through it." Ethan nodded, knowing those words would remain with him for the rest of his life. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the city, the department continued serving its community with renewed purpose, proving that the strongest form of justice is not found in revenge or humiliation, but in the courage to learn, the humility to change, and the determination to treat every person with equal dignity before knowing anything else about them. Because the true measure of justice is never the authority someone carries, but the respect they choose to give.